Thank you all for those of you who are here, starting with us bright and early, 9 a.m. It's actually the nicest time of day right now. It feels really good inside of this tent. I'm going to go through the boring stuff to begin with. We'll go through the housekeeping items and what we're going to be doing today. But first of all, I want to thank Lynn Hadfield, who's going to be doing our audio today. He has been working his tail off getting this up and going. And Aubrey Newell, who has spent literally an entire day because I keep asking really hard things of him. And he's figured out all kinds of stuff for live stream participants today, so you can watch everything that we're doing, and so we can record this as well and have it available later on. The way that we're going to go is we're going to be in here for a couple of hours. I'm a big believer that you can only retain the things that your rear end can endure. So we are only going to stay here long enough, until we can't sit any longer. So it's going to be a couple of hours this morning going through the 12 steps. Then we're going to do some hands-on stations. So we'll rotate. So we'll take a quarter of people at each of the 4 stations, and we're going to move for the next hour around the homestead, talking about some different hands-on topics. During the lunch hour, you're welcome to go and get some lunch, but we're also going to be doing a cooking without electricity demo, so you can come and go for that. Linda's going to be over near the back porch area. There's some seating over there. She's going to have all sorts of things you can come and check out. I don't know that she's going to have lunch for everybody, but she'll have some things to check out. So hopefully you brought lunch or can run and get it quickly. Then starting again at 1:30, we'll be back in here. Scott will do a lot of hands-on, really detailed information about lighting and communication. Then Grant will be here to do electricity. And then all of the presenters, as well as Kenneth, those of you who may know Kenneth Moravec, will be here to do a panel from 3 to 4, just a Q&A. So any questions that you have remaining, we'll start then. For restrooms, there are signs leading you down the stairs to the basement. And in the basement, there are signs showing you there's 2 restrooms down there. Feel free to use them. There are some little bit scary steps going down the center. I wouldn't use those. There are 2 good sets of steps, so one on each side going down to the basement. Use those, please. I don't want anybody falling down the scary steps in the middle. You're welcome to wander around the homestead and look around. A lot of the things in this section, this is the Medicinal Gardens, a lot of the things are labeled, so you can actually get a little bit more information. A lot of things in the garden are labeled, so you can get information. Hopefully the other pieces are ones that we're going to cover during the hands-on walk around in a little while. But you'll see some helpers as well at the table, as my daughter-in-law Brooklyn and my son Jens will be helping, and as well as my husband. They can answer a lot of the questions too. So if you have questions as you go through the day, feel free to ask them. I'm really grateful for their help as well. My 3 other children are far, far away, and they're very grateful that they're far, far away today. They're pretty sure. Only had one kid that's in town this weekend. Poor kid. The other 3 are very glad they're gone. But I'm grateful to have all of you here and that we can talk about this important topic. One of the things as I was thinking about today, I will share how I got into preparedness, but I want to talk just a little bit about my philosophy. I have a lot of people ask me frequently, so how do you feel about what's going on in the world? How do you feel about this thing? How do you feel about this thing? How do you feel about this thing? And you know what this thing means when I say that. There's a lot of different things happening. And in fact, it was funny. Just this past week, I had a family visit me in my dental office, and they were from Hawaii. They were here getting some medical treatment and other things done. And it was a mom and 2 grown children, a 19-year-old and a 23-year-old. The son was 23 years old. They're very tall, so I kind of had to look up when I talked with them. So I kind of envisioned myself looking up as I'm having this conversation. But the mom, they kind of cornered me in the room. I was in a closed room doing an exam on the daughter. And so they all stood up, these 3 tall people, and they're asking me all these questions. And one of them, they said, I see you write books. So what do you think about the state of the world right now? And I thought, oh no, here we go. They're very tall. And the mom said, will you calm him down? Talking to her son. She said, will you calm him down? Because he thinks the world's going to end like tomorrow, and he's just freaking out about everything. And so I talked a bit about some things, and then we went out of the room, and then the son cornered me again, and he said, no, what do you really think? What do you really think? He said, because I feel responsible for my family. I'm the only son. I feel responsible. My parents aren't doing anything. So this was his interpretation of his parents just being totally oblivious to the world. And I said, this is how I approach things. So that's what I want to share with you a bit, is how do I approach things? I believe that there is plenty of everything good in the world that we could possibly find if we look for it. I believe that a part of what is happening in the world is very based in fear. And if we stay there in that place of fear, it changes our own physical bodies. And literally, you know how it works. You walk into a scary situation or something that makes you fearful, you feel a change in your body, don't you? You feel a physical change. Your body changes physically. If that change happens, you are no longer as able to respond to a situation appropriately. Your body, your chemistry works differently. Everything works differently. There's two states of being. One's called the sympathetic. That's a bear is chasing me and I've got to run really fast. And then there's the parasympathetic, which means rest and refresh and relax and heal. Well, if we're always scared, we're always being chased by a hypothetical bear. And our body operates differently in that area and that state of being. If we stay there, our brain doesn't work properly. It doesn't think logically. It doesn't think in systems and patterns. Our bodies don't digest food, so they don't feed us properly. A lot of things don't work well. So my whole intent is to get us past the place of fear and into the place of I'm doing something so I am prepared and able to do what I need to do. Because if we live in fear, that's the only place we're going to be. So let me tell you how I got here. I've not been doing this my whole life. This has not been my life. And some of you may have heard this story before, but it was about 2014. I had a book recommended to me by my hairdresser, of all people. And everybody knows anything your hairdresser tells you is totally true. So you have to do it. So this hairdresser recommended this book, and I was happening to go on a trip. It was Christmas time, and so we were going to be driving down to Phoenix to see family. So I had 9 hours in the car. And I love car rides because I can read in the car. So I always bring lots of books. So I was reading this book on the way, and it was talking about some possible scenarios for future events. As I'm reading this book, I'm thinking, whoa, okay, all right. This is scaring me a little, I don't know about this. And I just got this overwhelming feeling, if any of this is true at all, and interestingly enough, some of these things have actually happened the last year since 2014 till now. But if any of this is true at all, I am not prepared. I would not be able to handle this. My family would not be able to fare this very well. So I turned to my husband, who was driving the car, and the poor guy, if he's ever driving the car and I'm reading, he just knows he's going to be like, reader's theater the whole time. Oh my gosh, I have to read this to you. This is so good. This is so good. And the whole time he just endures, and just listens to whatever I say. But I said, listen, if this is at all true, we are not prepared. We've got to do something. And he said, all right, let's do something then. So at the time, I had some 72-hour kits. My daughter was 10 and hers had diapers in it still. So I wasn't really very prepared. I hadn't kept up on this. I wasn't ready to if any of this happened again, I wasn't prepared. So I instantly felt overwhelmed, right? Because that's what you feel when you're talking preparedness. Instantly overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, how am I going to do any of this stuff? It's just too big. And I thought, okay, I cannot do anything in the state of overwhelm. This is not how I approach my life. So I looked at all of the possible things that I needed to do. And I said, all right, I can fit this into 12 categories. There's 12 months in a year. I'm going to take one category per month, and I'm only going to focus on that. So my mom growing up taught me a really useful skill. She taught me something called plan your worries. So the way that she told me to do this is she said, listen, you can worry about everything in your whole life all at the same time. But what good does it do if you can't do anything about the thing, right? What good does it do? So she said, you plan your worries. You don't worry about the thing you're going to worry about, because it's hard to tell yourself, oh, just don't worry, because it's going to happen. You don't worry about the thing you're going to worry about until you actually could do something about the thing you're going to worry about. So this is how I've gotten a lot done in my life. If, for instance, the handout for today, I planned to worry about this Thursday night. I could have worried about it nonstop for the last 7 weeks, since it's been prepared, but I had way too many other things to do before then. So this got worried about Thursday night, and it got done Friday, yesterday, about midday. So planning, I decided I'm going to apply this plan your worry principle to preparedness. I'm not going to worry about all 12 topics at once, because it just doesn't do any good. I can only tackle one thing at once. So I organized the 12 things based on what I felt was the highest priority. And I decided I was going to only tackle one category at a time. I wasn't going to think about the rest. I wasn't going to worry that I wasn't prepared in those areas. I was only going to think about the one thing. And that allowed me to deep dive into that one thing enough that I felt really good about that topic once I was done with it, once I'd spent a month and delve into that. I'll talk in a minute about which one I started with. So I started doing that personally. And it was interesting. Every month I would tackle a topic, and then I would tackle another, and then I would tackle another. By about September, I was gaining a lot of momentum, because you do. You go, I can do this. Oh, okay, I'm learning some stuff. I'm finding some sources. I'm doing other things. And so by about September, I started doubling up on things and doing a couple of topics a month. And you'll see my 12 topics, they get a little easier by the end of the year too, which is kind of nice. We tackle the heavy ones first. So at that time, I was then asked from my church to help all of the people in my vicinity with the same thing. And I thought, I know how to do this. I know how to do this. Let's do 12 topics. We'll do 12 topics, 12 months. This is good. We did that for a year. I was asked to do it for a larger group in my neighborhood. So I said, okay, I know how to do this. 12 topics, 12 topics, 12 topics. I did that for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden I realized this is a book. This is a book. This is something that this needs to be put into a book format. And so I've had a lot of friends. I've had a lot of others that have contributed and helped with it. And so that's the 12 steps to emergency preparedness, or Be Prepared, Not Scared book. That's all it is. It's just me simply giving to you the things that I've learned along the way in taking topics one topic at a time, so that it's not overwhelming, so that it's manageable, so that it's doable. That's all it is. Now, the reason this event is free, the reason most everything I do with Be Prepared is free, is because this is not something that I want to do to make money. This is something I just simply am doing because I want to help people. So I hope that we can share some things today that inspire you, that enable you to do something rather than overwhelming you. That's the challenge with this topic. Is sometimes it's really easy to get overwhelmed, and that's the last thing I want to do, because as soon as you get into that state of overwhelm, you stop actually doing. You stop doing. So overwhelm is not on the agenda today. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but we're not going to overwhelm. And I challenge you just to take it a topic at a time. You're going to learn some specific things on each topic, but you're not going to do them all at once. So what did I start with? There's a rule of three, survival rules of threes. And hopefully you all got this on the email. If you weren't able to get it, it will be on your email when you get home. Take some notes, take it on your phone, whatever you need. I didn't print them just because it's a free event. I didn't want to pay for all the printing, to be honest. So this was sent to you. It's just a guide. We're going to talk about a lot of things as we go too. And there's also Amazon suggested links. So for products, because people always say, well, what did you buy? What did you get? Where do I get it? I actually made some Amazon suggested link lists. So it'll give you an idea of specific products that are based on each chapter. So they are on here as well, those suggested link links, whatever the version it should be in. The other thing, we'll get back to the survival rule of three just a moment. I forgot I had a couple things to talk about. A lot of preparedness conferences are all about the stuff. Tables and booths and speakers are all about their stuff, right? Lots of stuff. You could walk out of there with thousands of dollars in stuff in tow. It's not what this is about, because you can buy stuff. And, I have stuff. I didn't haul it all out because I didn't want to put it all away again. That was my biggest thing. I'm like, oh, this is enough. I got to put this all away at the end of today. So that was one of the reasons. But the other reason is that I don't want to focus on stuff here. I want to focus on skills, because skills you can start acquiring all the time, nonstop, and actions. What should you do? It's more important that you do and start moving than it is that you just acquire a whole bunch of stuff. Because if something were to happen and you just had a whole bunch of stuff and you had no clue how to use it, are you really that much better off? You're just maybe a little poorer than you were, but you're not really that much better off. So let's talk about skills as well. So where did I start? Which topic did I start with? I started thinking, okay, everybody talks about 72-hour kits, so that must be the first topic. And then I started researching. And I found that actually, if you look at emergency scenarios, the large portion of emergencies would keep us in our home. So let's think about it. So just start yelling out some potential emergency situations. Earthquake. Okay. You may stay in your home, you may leave your home, depending on the danger or the damage to your home, right? So it could be either or an earthquake. Okay, what else I didn't hear? Power outage. What would you do? Would you leave your home? No, you'd stay in your home. Okay, what else? Say another one. What? Pandemic, imagine that. That can never happen. Hurricane. Okay, so pandemic, would you stay in your home? Did we stay in our home? Did we leave our home? No, we stayed in our home. Okay, hurricane, tornado. Could leave our home, maybe would stay in our home based on where we were. Fire, may stay in our home, may leave our home, either way. Water contamination, that can never happen either. We would never have a boil order, as we were just under boil order like 2 weeks ago, right? Never would happen. Did we stay in our home? Yeah. So the large majority of emergencies, another emergency you may not think of is losing employment. Would you stay in your home? Yeah. So what I figured out is probably 75% of emergencies would probably stay in our home. The other 25% would be what we term an evacuation emergency. We'd leave. So the home is burning down. We have severe water damage. It's not safe. Severe earthquake damage, something of that sort. But the large majority of emergency situations, we'd stay in our home. So if that's the case, a 72-hour kit is made for leaving. It's made for putting on your back and walking out of your home. So is that really the first thing we should focus on if the large majority of emergency has us staying in our home? No, I decided no. It's not the first thing we should work on. So survival rule of 3 says we can survive for 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 hours in unprotected situations. So if it were a severe ice storm, you could live for about 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So in those scenarios, then I decided, okay, even before food storage, I'm going to focus on water, because I can live for 3 weeks without food. Not happily, probably, but I could live. But I couldn't live more than 3 days without water. So that's what I decided. So this was just from my own personal study. Water was most important. All right, what we're going to do as we go through these is I am going to highlight some stuff, some examples. We're going to really focus on some skills and actions, but I want you to ask questions as we go. And then most of these we're going to have hands-on in a little while, and we're going to talk about some specific scenarios as well. So we'll talk about those also. But I want you to ask questions as you go, as we're hitting different topics. If you have some specific things, a lot of the information, and like I said, I am not here to sell books. That is not why it's here. But honestly, you probably just need to buy the book because it has so much information that you could go search the internet for days and weeks and months, which I did, or you can have it all in one single place that can just walk you through the 12 steps. So go find it on your own for free. That's fabulous. Or if you want it in one place, I've done that work to put it all together. So let's start with water. All right. I don't know where everybody is here, and we're not going to survey you all. I suspect we have some people who are just beginning with preparedness. I suspect we have some people who have been doing it for decades longer than myself. So we're going to have to try to navigate some of those different scenarios. Be prepared, not scared, and it's right over there. You can go check it out. So yes, we purchased a whole bunch of them so that they would be here if people wanted while they were here. Water. So if this is all very elementary to you, I apologize, but hopefully it will spur in you to go, oh, you know what, I don't have that. Or if you're starting brand new, I hope that this is, I can do that. You know, actually, because this keeps coming to my mind, and sometimes when it keeps coming to my mind, it means I need to say it right now. There's a principle called the normalcy bias that I do want to cover. Let's just cover it now. I was going to cover a different section, but let's cover it now. This is a psychological principle. I've actually been studying psychology a lot and the way our brains work. So normalcy bias is our brains. We are wired to expect that what has always happened will continue to happen. So did anyone think we could have a pandemic and businesses would be shut down and we'd be walking around with masks on anywhere we went? And how quickly did that happen? 3 days, right? It was interesting because I don't shop very often, but yesterday I was actually shopping for moments, and I walked into the store, and it was actually weird for me to walk in without a mask on. I thought, how did that switch? How did that switch? Because remember how it was so weird to walk with a mask on at the beginning, and all of a sudden it's switched already. Interesting. But our minds are ingrained to think that we'll continue to have what we normally have. Everybody, has anyone said during this pandemic, when is it going to go back to normal? Has anyone ever said that? I haven't even ever thought that. Oh my gosh, when is it going to get back to normal again? Our brains are wired to think it will continue happening the way that it's always happened. So one of my most favorite stories in this example is of a gentleman who was in the Malibu, California area. He was you know how there's a lot of wildfires in that coastal area of Malibu. And so there was a wildfire coming his way. And it wasn't the first time. I mean, there had been fires coming his way multiple times. But this time, the police came. They said, listen, this one, I think, is probably going to take out your home. You have 3 hours to evacuate. So he had 3 hours to evacuate. He could have gotten so much out of his home in those 3 hours. Instead, he spent 2 hours and 50 minutes pacing in front of the TV, watching CNN, sure that it would never come to his home because it never had before. Watching out the window, seeing the flames approaching. Finally, he grabbed his dogs, his keys, and he left with his life. And that's it. That's normalcy bias in action. How many of you had it when the pandemic started? I lived it. So in my practice, I remember the day, I remember we were sitting. I think I've been learning a lot about psychology, actually. We only remember peak events. So does anyone always, we just went through the anniversary of September 11th. People always say, where were you? Where were you when the towers fell? Where were you when JFK was killed? Because we remember peak events. The pandemic now for me is a peak event. I remember sitting at my computer in my office, completely frozen. Like, there is no way that the government would shut down my business. There is no way this would happen. And I'm clicking back and forth between articles. I'd see a patient kind of, but not really, and I'm back on my computer. I was literally frozen in normalcy bias. I could not move forward. I cannot do it because I thought there was no way this would happen. 6 weeks, my office was closed, the lights were off, and nobody was allowed there because they would have died. That's what I was told if they had entered those doors. So I thought there was no way to happen. We have to break the normalcy bias. We have to talk about some scenarios and things that could and will potentially happen because we have to introduce those concepts into our minds. Now, interestingly enough, media does this for us some. Have any of you read any books that are like survival type situations, scenarios? You read any of those? Yeah, they're entertaining, but I think they also open your mind to a potential other normal. Scares you sometimes. It does scare you sometimes. There's a group of books that I love called Ashfall. They're one of my favorites. They talk about what would happen if the Yellowstone, they call it the Yellowstone caldera. The Yellowstone caldera erupted and threw ash into the air. What would happen? It's pretty scary. Like I said, it's pretty scary. However, it opened my mind to a lot of potential things. And we're going to talk about things like this, which is how in this fictional situation they survived. But these are just potential normal things we open our minds to. Okay, water. What could happen with water? We could have a boil order. I was so annoyed by that boil order. Was anyone else annoyed by that boil order? And I was so bad at it. Like, I couldn't believe how bad I was. I was terrible at it. And my husband and I went out of town during the middle of it. We came back. My older kids were watching my younger kids. And we said, okay, guys, what are you doing for the boil order? And they went, we forgot there was one. I'm like, perfect, great. We would all die if there were really some bad things in this water. So we were terrible at it. But one thing that we did is we have a Berkey filter that we have all of our water out of at home. And I just said, guys, just don't drink anything ever unless it comes out of that. Let's talk about, because that's a potential situation. Where are water lines? Where do they exist? Are they in the air? They're in the ground. What could happen to the ground that would disrupt a water line? Earthquake, flood, anything that would affect the ground, chemical spill, anything that could affect the ground would affect water lines. Water lines would be completely unusable. That means we need to be able to have water to use and be able to treat water wherever we find it. Water to use, the very simplest thing is just get a couple of cases of water and put them underneath every single bed in your home. This is the simplest water storage that exists. It's the most expensive water storage, but it's the simplest. To get a couple of cases of water under every single bed in your room. Every single bed in your home. Interesting thing is, I've told this to so many people, and they said, just the fact that I went to Costco, except you can't get water at Costco right now, warning sign. Just the fact that they went to Costco, got some cases of water, put it under their bed, gave them the security, the peace, the whatever it was to click them out of that scared place and went, oh, I can do the next thing because that was easy. So that's why I start with this every single time. Now, what if, so you need to store water and lots of water. Today, we're going to do a hands-on with my son who built a water retention or a water storage center over on the side of our home, and he's going to walk you through how to do it. Yes?
Just a quick question. Do you have to pay attention to the expiration dates, or can you ignore them?
So here's the question. What is it going to do?
Bleach from the plastic, maybe?
Bleach from the plastic. Are you going to die faster from the plastic leaching into your water or from no water? These are the questions I start asking. What am I going to die faster from? Yeah, I'm gonna keep this water, and if it's something that I need to drink, I'm gonna drink it. The Berkey could filter that out. You could dump this through this. Yep.
How do you know when your filter is done filtering?
I had a funny story. I'll share it. So when there's a certain number of gallons that it goes through, and so you look, I don't count, that would be way too hard. But you know, you just think, okay, maybe that's 2 years. You consider how many gallons am I going to go through in a couple of years. When I bought my Berkey, I asked the gentleman I purchased it from, and he said it'll last you 20 years. And he said, if you don't think Jesus is going to be here by then, you're crazy. I went, okay. That was his comment. Anyway, I'll always remember that. So how long have I had it? Probably about 5 years. So anyway, so I got 15 to go. But I do change them periodically. I just kind of, keep it in the back of my head. I apologize for yard noises. We're outside. We're going to get them. So there are actual filters that go, I don't have it in here because they have to stay wet, but they're actually actual filters that go in these devices, and you just change the filter. So you don't have to change the whole thing. You just change out the filter.
And then you, in your book, does it tell where you can get them?
Yep. Berkey is the place you get them, and that's where you get the replacement filters and everything else. Yep.
And how often did you say you change the filters?
I do it about every 3 years. Okay. And I use a ton. I have a huge giant one, and that's all we use for our kitchen. And I mean, it is running constantly, nonstop, about every 3 years. So I have replacement filters as part of my storage. I have a couple filters in there, so that if I needed to use it for long term, I have them. Yes. Yes, the fridge. Okay, so let's actually go into that. What are the two things that filtration units need to do? There's two things that we have to do to water, and we've got to talk about this in relation to that. So we have to filter water. Filtration is for chunks. Okay, that's how I imagine it. Filtration is for chunks, and there are some things that you can only kill with a filter. So filter is going to get out leaves and rocks and bugs and probably those plastic, some of those things. Filtration is also the only way to get out protozoa or parasites. It's the only way you're going to be able to get those out of is with a filter. So you have to filter water first. If you have nothing other than a whole bunch of layers of cotton and some sand and some dirt, that will also work as a filtration unit because you're going to get out the chunks. Then you have to purify. Purification is going to kill the viruses and bacteria that are too small to be caught in the filtration. Does that make sense? They're too little. So then you have to purify, and that's a chemical killing of the bug. So the Berkey does both. It does filtration and it does purifying. So when you pull it out of your refrigerator, you're not getting chemical purification. So you're not actually killing bugs. You're only filtering stuff. So that's the difference. Now, when you put, that's why you put bleach in the water when you store it, is you want to make sure that you're storing it without, because bleach is a chemical purifier. However, bleach inactivates, and you can't store bleach as a long-term purifier. So what I recommend you store, this is the other must-have, I believe, is something called pool shock. And pool shock, you want it to be at least 68%. This is 68%, what's called calcium hypochlorite. What this is this makes bleach, and I put it on here. So what you do is you get 1 teaspoon of this to 2 gallons of water. Now you've made Clorox. So then you use that just like Clorox. So the EPA says a 1 to 100 ratio. You would add 2 tablespoons of that new solution to 3/4 of a gallon of water. It says it on here. You don't need to memorize it. It's also in the book. So this is enough to purify about 12,000 gallons of water. This tiny little bag. Do not store bleach. Store this. This costs like $8 on Amazon.
Well, I have a question because, there's a lot of controversy that, actually doing bleach, and there are other things that you can use.
Sure.
So would you just do that, or what do you feel about bleach? I mean, do you feel like it's harmful?
It's calcium hypochlorite. It literally is chlorine and hydrogen. So again, what am I going to die from first? No water, or perhaps the bacteria and viruses in the water, or the bleach? Viruses and no water.
So you feel like it's not that harmful?
No, and it's so little that you're putting in there. You're putting 2 tablespoons to 3/4 of a gallon. It's very little. It's very little.
So how about
and all of the water you drink from a faucet has chlorine in it for your whole entire life.
And if you set water out with chlorine in, it
Thank you for saying that.
Right?
Yes, that's a really fast way
And
to
so you
off-gas
just
it.
set
Yep.
like overnight and
Yep.
the chlorine
Yep.
gone in the morning.
Yep, 24 hours, it'll off-gas the chlorine because chlorine is in gaseous form. Once it's added into the water, it'll off-gas and it will be free of the chlorine for drinking.
You just answered my question from about last 10 years. Seriously, because like I have these containers that don't have water in them yet.
But by the end of next week, they will.
That's right. I feel
Mhm.
hesitant about cleaning them out with Clorox. You clean it first,
Nope.
empty, and then you put the
Nope.
water out. Oh, what am I gonna do?
And you know what? That's part of the overwhelm is all of the information out there. Just do it. It's going to be so much better than not.
I even have a tube. A clean hose. Now I can take. Okay.
By the end of the week, you'll have them full.
I was told by a physicist that after the degassing, the 24 hours, if you plant a cherry tree and put that water at the base of a cherry tree, it will restructure the water to 1,000 whatever it is frequency.
Very
Put
interesting.
it there for 24 hours.
All right. So it's healthy water. Berkey. Yep, Berkey. All right. So filter and purification, we talked about that. The chunks versus the chem versus the bugs. That's what they are. So action in this item, in this area, is look where you can get your water from. Just pay attention. Can you get it from a rooftop? Do you have like this? This is my husband has to like get his brain, this structure. So I had a dream. When I ever have a dream, my husband runs for the hills, man. I had a dream that we'd have conferences just like this. So we're living a dream right now. And so I just start looking for a structure. And I found the structure on KSL for $1,000. It was somebody in somebody's farmyard. They hadn't used it, been sitting there for 10 years. So my husband drove down to somewhere in the middle of nowhere, picked it up in the trailer, brought it back. And I looked at it and I said, I'm pretty sure we can throw that together on the weekend. It's how things work in my mind versus how they work in reality. So what ended up happening is the very first day I started putting these up, and they sent me a picture. I was at work. They sent me a picture. They said, we don't even have ladders this tall. We're going to have to go buy ladders to actually be able to do this. And the instructions are non-existent, so we're having to make this up as we go. I'm like, oh, okay, so the weekend? No. So it took a few months. So, it's $1,000 and 1,000 hours of labor is pretty much how it worked to get this set up. So anyway, next year, once he survives the brain damage that I caused this year, we're going to put some rain gutters, some gutter systems on this, because think of the water that'll come off this if rain ever happens. I want you to start looking around your house. What do you have? What shed do you have? Whatever, that you could pull rain off, that you can put some cheap guttering on. Heck, go to a construction site and get some flash material that's the leftover, fold it into a gutter. I saw a guy do this, so I know it can work. Fold it into a gutter, put it at the edge of your thing, and have it downspout into a bucket. There are so many ways to catch water. Just start paying attention. High water level. When we were digging out our root cellar, and I left the root cellar open, you're welcome to wander around, do whatever you want while you're here today. When we were digging out the root cellar, there was water 6 inches down. It's now in my head. I know where water is. It's 6 inches down from the bottom of my root cellar. It's right there. So would I dig down and get it? You better believe I would if I need water. So pay attention. What do you have where you have it, where you already are? And we're going to talk about our rain harvesting system that my son built. It was supposed to be his senior in high school project. Didn't get done for 3 more years, but it's done now. So he's going to explain that over there later in a while.
Are you saying that when you dug the root cellar, you found that there was water 6? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So if I have to get water, I know it's under 6 inches under.
So Michelle,
Easy to get.
Then do you use that as a root cellar, or did you have to dig somewhere else and that goes 6
Where the ground is, it's fine. 6 inches under, it's water.
Okay.
But where the ground is, it's fine. So yeah, it's still a root cellar. Okay, chapter 2. So then I started thinking, okay, food. Food, we can only last 3 weeks, and everybody's going to be so much happier if we have food, right? In an emergency, we're just going to be happier if we have food, and we're going to be able to do a lot more if we have food. So food comes next, but not necessarily always this kind of stuff. This is expensive. This will last for forever. This is what I want you to store if you have a pandemic and can't get to the store for 2 weeks. Why? It's easy. Do you need to heat this? I mean, it tastes better heated, but could you eat it straight out of this can? Absolutely. You would have to do nothing to this, right? How about this? Could you give that to a kid with a spoon? Yeah. You wouldn't need any way to heat it. You wouldn't need any way to cook. And we're used to this. It's food we're used to. If you have an emergency and you start eating this, guess what's going to happen to your gut? You're not going to feel good. because you're not used to it. So in a short-term emergency, this is it. And the large majority of emergencies are probably going to be short-term, 3-4 weeks, that sort of thing. Have enough food. Have enough food that's easy to use. This is the other thing you need. Why do you need this?
Open it up.
If the power's out and all you have is an electric can opener, guess what happens? You're going to be using a chip or, a knife to dangerously open it. Exactly. Unless you want to have to resort to the tin snips, I have just like 7 of these down in my food storage. They cost like $1 at the dollar store.
So are you going to talk about expiration days, because that's what's kind of been another thing too? Is
Perfect segue right now. Yep. So how to make your food storage last. This is basically the rules for this. Store all your food storage in a cool, dry area out of direct light. As much as possible, have it covered, have it cool. Acidic foods, so that's tomatoes and fruit, are only going to last 12 to 18 months because they start to eat away the metal and the lining inside of the cans. Non-acidic canned foods are going to last 2 to 5 years. So something like this, 5 years, no problem. Use dented cans first as they will rust. Dried foods need to be double bagged and sealed to last a long time, and ground grains, so flours have insect eggs. So always store in the freezer, or just don't mind the insects. So the flour, I bought a whole bunch of flour a year ago. Why? Everybody was buying flour a year ago. Why not? So I bought a whole bunch of flour a year ago. And now when I use it and I dump it into my bucket, to use, and then I go to get it, I don't tell my kids, Jens, you're not listening right now. There's always a few little black bugs, but they always just crawl to the top and I scoop them out before I use the flour. I don't really care. He's nodding back there. He's like, oh, that doesn't surprise me. So again, what's going to kill you more? No food or a bug or two? This is just the way I think, okay? No food is going to kill you more. The bugs will be added protein, and the bugs are just, they're tasty. I'm sure we just don't choose to eat them very frequently. But I pull them out. And so if there's bug eggs and there's tiny little bugs, it's okay. It's okay. Just pull them out. Throw them away. Don't tell your kids. They'll survive. So I want you to start using the one more rule when you go to the store. I want you to use this as a game. Yes.
You were talking so fast.
Sorry, I talk fast frequently.
How do you do that?
So put them in 2 Ziploc bags.
And that's it.
That's it.
As long as it's.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It's just going to allow less moisture to get in. That's the idea.
Okay, like if you're dehydrating your own food, put in 2 Ziploc bags, and it'll last how long?
I mean, ideally, you're going to put an oxygen absorber in there because oxygen with moisture is going to rehydrate your food. So you're trying not to do it. But I am so on the simplicity principle. Like if it means you've got to get some dry ice and seal it in a special bucket, you're not going to do it. So go get 2 Ziploc bags and make sure they're sealed really tight. Do you know what I mean? Like that's just go do stuff.
Is that for even the ones that are already sealed from the
No,
store?
these you're good to go with.
Okay.
It's if you have your own stuff.
If you are, okay.
Yeah, these are good to go. These are good to go. Yes.
So if you buy flour, like say 10 pounds, and put it in your freezer for a little bit, and a month or so, and then bring it back out, I mean that supposedly kills, right?
Yeah, you've cryopreserved those insect eggs. Let's see if they survive. Maybe let's see if they're prehistoric insects, if they'll survive that cryopreservation or not. You never know. Again, if there's an insect that pops up, life will go on.
So,
Yeah.
Michelle, what about, like the wheat? That's the one that goes rancid.
If it's exposed to oxygen. Oxygen and heat and light are the things that cause rancidity. So rancidity is simply the thing that it's the change in oils. So any food that has oils in it will go rancid if exposed to light or heat. So that's why you want to keep things dry and dark, because you're going to extend the lifespan of everything, especially something that has oils in it. So that's the reason that when you grind wheat and leave it as a ground flour, it will go rancid because now it's exposed to light and heat and air and all those things. And that changes the bonds in the fat itself and cause rancidity.
But if you did that and then you had, I'm sure you can get the oxygen fats on Amazon.
Yep.
If you put it in, because I'm just wondering, because
It'll store longer.
I buy whole wheat from the store or stuff, and then you smell it and it's rancid, but it's been in a cool, dark container, but it still goes rancid.
Yeah, as cold as it can be in the fridge if possible. If I grind any flour, I'll stick it in the fridge to save it. It'll last longer. But this is why you don't store brown rice.
Right.
because brown rice won't store long term because of the oils in the bran, the oils in the outside layer. So that's why you store white rice, and sometimes even refined flour. That's why you don't store wheat flour. You store white flour for those reasons.
So you can put, like, say, if I just start putting my brown rice in the freezer.
Yeah, it'll last
it'll
longer.
keep longer.
Yep.
That's that.
It is much better if you parboil. So are you talking the kind where they take some of that bran off and then store it, or you parboil it?
No, I saw at Costco they have
Parboiled rice. So it's gonna be like a polished rice. They'll remove a little bit of that bran. It will store longer than a straight brown rice. Yep. Actions. So I want you just to start using the one more rule. I want you to make this a game, make it fun. How can you inexpensively just get one more? You know, you're buying this for something you're making this week. Okay, how could I get one more for like 3 cents more? You know, whatever it is, just make this a game. Every time you go, just buy one more. Also look at online classifieds right now, because it was a really good year for fruit here. So there's people just giving away fruit online. If anyone lives near me, which some of you do, there's a home down that street that has so many apples, and I cannot use them all. So all of you are welcome to them. More apples than can possibly be used. You have to have permission, but look around your neighborhood. That's what I do, is I look around my neighborhood. I'm like, okay, I bet you they're not using it. I noticed they aren't using it. Most people are actually thrilled to have you use their food because they feel sad that they're not. Okay, long-term food storage. This is the stuff everybody knows about, right? This is what you always think about when you think about emergency preparedness. This is it. Well, you can see this is only one little thing on this whole table. So this is a great place and it's a great thing to have. However, it's not all the food storage is. But I want to think about a couple things about it. First of all, do you have a way to use all of that wheat you've got stored in your basement? Make sure you have a wheat grinder of some variety. I have like 4 of them. Just because people usually gift me things like, I'm never going to use this. Okay, I will take it. And then when you are not able to use your wheat and you're starving to death, you'll come visit. So the wheat, make sure you have a wheat grinder. Make sure you have ways to use stuff. Now I'm going to talk about something controversial. Scotch broth. So I've been told off about Scotch broth, like vocally told off about Scotch broth. Which I thought was really interesting, but let me explain. Let me make sure that you are very clear about what it is and why you would have it. Again, when I started finding out about long-term food storage, what I did is and in the book, there's a calculator. You put in there how many family members you have, and you calculate how much stuff you need to buy. And I calculated it for my family, and I about had a heart attack. I thought, I would never have enough room to store all of that. And I don't have enough money to buy all of that. You know, I just had a heart attack. I've since slowly added, and it's built up to what it needs to be now. But it was so overwhelming to look at those giant numbers. So I found this thing called Scotch broth. And the reason they call it this is because actually there is a kind of soup in the UK that they eat called Scotch broth. And it's largely beans and rice and just grains. And so they call it Scotch broth. That's the reason for the name. It has nothing to do with scotch or drinking or anything else, but that's why it's called that. So the reason for the controversy is that this is often taken as the only thing you need to do. If this is all you do, then you're going to be fine, and this is going to take care of all your food storage. That is not true. So I am standing here saying this is not all you need to do. The purpose of Scotch broth is to get you to do something. That's it. And if you do something, then you feel better about your efforts, and then you do something else. It will also buy you some time. So for about $200, I just had somebody just recently, like maybe a month ago, they were asking me some questions about where to get some items. They did this, and they said, you were about right on your pricing. It was about $200. For about $200, you can get enough to feed a family of 4 for a few months. Now, would you get super sick of eating this? For sure. But would it be better than eating nothing? You've read about pioneers eating shoe leather. This is probably better than shoe leather. So if this is all you had to eat, you would be happy to eat it. It's basically white rice, some barley, kidney beans, lentils, black beans, split peas, chickpeas. You see it on there with some bouillon. You don't realize, I think, how overly spiced and flavored our food is, especially if you're buying a lot of packaged or takeout food. It is heavily spiced with salt, sugar, fat. If you're just eating a plain old bowl of rice, It's not going to be very palatable unless you put something in it. So make sure you've stored some of this stuff too. But so you put bouillon in this and you store it in 5-gallon buckets. And there's more detailed instructions in the book about how to do this. That, if, you know, again, it's the psychology piece. If you do that and you have it in your basement, then all of a sudden that fear dissipates and you go, I knew something else. Okay, that was easy enough. I could afford that. I feel better. Now I can do something else. That is the purpose for Scotch Broth. It's to get you started.
It's like a jump start. But if you've
It's
already
just a
got
jump
bunch of
start.
food storage and all, you don't need to do that, right?
No.
But if you have nothing, this is
It's a
great way
fabulous
get
place to
started.
start. But you know what? I did do it because it's a very easy thing to hand off. So I could take one of these 5-gallon buckets and I can give it to my married kids and they could take it to their apartment now. Or if it were emergency, I could carry it down there if I had to. You know, I could walk down to Provo with that bucket of beans and rice and it could hold them for a couple of months. So I do have it, even though I have a lot of other stuff too. I do have it because it's a very easy to use, portable, simple to hand off to somebody else kind of method too. Like your neighbor. I could dish it into a bowl they brought over. I could scoop up a couple cups of it and they could hand it off to a neighbor that needed some food because they didn't have something. Yep, it's a really easy thing to use that for.
You can use it with your garden by adding
Beautiful.
carrots.
And that's what it should be used as. It should be supplemented with the other things. You have other roots that you've dug, whatever it might be. The only caveat is if you're going to use it for a couple of days, the onions will change the flavor of it. So you don't put onions in except for day of food. That's the one thing. Because oftentimes we think we're going to make the food and then we're going to eat it today. Most likely, if you're doing something like this, you're going to make it one day and then you're going to eat it for 2 or 3. You know, we just don't think like that anymore. But don't put the onions in until the day you actually want to use it. Skills, start cooking with this stuff. All right, so this is a big one. This is my own personal, I don't have a beans here. If you're starting to use just things like the Scotch Broth food, beans and rice, there's something on the outside of a bean called phytic acid. I do need to talk about this because it's really important. Most of these stored foods are going to fall into this category, and I have information about it in the book. This is one of the things I've studied quite extensively. If you think about a seed, in fact, I don't have a, well, I might have a bean seed here, but I know I have a corn seed. And I do. Perfect. I have a bean seed. Okay, so why is this not a plant? Why? And what does the water do? Have you ever thought about this? It softens the outside, and the outside has what's called phytic acid, which is a sprouting inhibitor. That's how come I can have a whole packet of bean seeds here. It has every single thing in here to grow a bean plant, doesn't it? I mean, how many bean plants are sitting right here? It has every single thing inside of the seed to grow a bean plant. Every single thing, except they're locked inside. What a beautiful package. I mean, isn't that amazing? Somebody must have thoughtfully created that. Either that or something banged together and created that. But most likely this was thoughtful, and what an amazing package, because everything needed for that whole entire bean plant is right here, but it's locked up. It's locked up with that sprouting inhibitor. So what if I take this handful of beans? Oop, I'm gonna have a bean plant there someday. You pop it. Thank you. What if I took this and I just put it in a pot and started to cook it? I've not removed the sprouting inhibitor. What does that mean? The sprouting inhibitor locks nutrients up, right? It's what it's doing right here. It's locking up the nutrients. It does the same in you. If you just cook that pot of beans and you've not done anything to it previously, all of the nutrients are locked up. There is this phytic acid that bind onto minerals and things in the foods, including the other foods you eat with it. So let's say I eat that pot of beans with a loaf of bread that I just carefully and lovingly made for my family. Now everything that I've eaten together is in my stomach, and that sprouting inhibitor locks up the nutrients from even the bread that I just ate with it. So what it does is it means that foods that are so potentially full of nutrients are no longer nutritious for us. And not only that, but they throw off the way that our calcium and phosphate and everything work in our bones, and they could be actually detrimental, particularly to our guts. You have to inactivate that sprouting inhibitor. Here's the beautiful thing. It's as easy as soaking it. It's that water. That water does it. When you put it in the soil, what you are doing by watering the seed is washing away the sprouting inhibitor and now allowing all the nutrients inside to unlock and say, it's time to wake up and go to work. And now we grow the plant. You have to wash that away when you eat it if you want to get the nutrients out of the food as well. So for any beans, corn, so if you look on the instructions, I think it does say it on here. Step 1 to use Scotch broth is soak in water 6 to 8 hours or overnight. You wash off the beans and rice, you put new water on, and you cook them. And you've now totally inactivated the sprouting inhibitor, and you're going to have released all the nutrients.
I'm so embarrassed to ask this.
Never.
Does that mean that like the beans that we eat could be seeds?
They are seeds.
And we just eat them as beans?
Yep. But if they are like this, they've already been treated, cooked. They're no longer live. There's nothing live in here. So you're not going to cook this one. But absolutely, you'll go and look out of my garden. You'll see, if you're walking through the garden, you'll see my garden's looking a little scraggly right now. The reason it's looking a little scraggly right now is because most everything out there is turning into seeds. And I'll be harvesting the seeds in the next few weeks. So all the beans that I didn't get picked soon enough to eat fresh are now growing long. They're ripening, they're maturing, they're going to dry on the vine, and then that will be my seed for next year. That's how gardening works.
Like so many questions in my brain.
Oh, good. I'm glad. See, this is why no question is an embarrassing question. It's just something you didn't know before. So please ask. Absolutely. So you have to soak these foods. How do you do this in an emergency when like the world is crashing in and your kids are crying because they're starving and you have no power and you're having to use your alternate cooking methods? And how do you do that if you've never done it? See, you need to practice. You need to practice when it's like normal time. Again, that word normal, when it's normal time so that you can do it. Okay, an action in this area, food storage inventory. Just go see what you have. You may be shocked that you have more than you think. Just go see what you have. What holes do you need to fill? Then make a plan. Make a 12-month plan. Okay, I'm gonna work on flour this month. I'm gonna work on oats this month. Whatever it is. Don't do it all at once. Just make a plan.
So
Yes.
do we even need to soak just rice? I've never soaked rice.
Yes. Yes.
How long?
Overnight.
Overnight?
Overnight.
Oh, really?
Yep. Not only that, it will increase nutrition, it will increase digestibility, and it will shorten cooking time. All three of the above for every single grain or legume. That's what should be done to it. Yep.
So like your brown rice, if you're going to bake.
100%. Yep. You should be sprouting all of these things. It will. Are you soaking them? Soaking, sprouting, or fermenting will do this to the bread. I mean, if you want to learn about sourdough, so I'm going to be doing a hands-on sourdough baking class where you will come to here. So this changes. Some of you have been here and you've been to the other hands-on classes. This whole center changes to tables, chairs, and we cook in here. We're doing all sorts of cooking and making, and you take home stuff. So if you're interested in how to turn your cans of wheat into something that's incredibly nutritious, because it can also be not very good for you, incredibly nutritious, come back for the hands-on sourdough making class. You're going to walk out of here with a loaf or with some dough. You're going to go cook at home, and your family's going to go, did you learn how to make that? Because that's the most delicious bread I've ever eaten in my life. So come back and learn if you want to learn that.
Okay, so what if you are like gluten, you have to eat gluten-free, and you have the rice, and you have a meal, and you grind it? Is that taking away? I mean, is that opening up, or do I still need to soak it,
So
then dry it, and then
good
grind
question.
it?
Are you going to be using it dry or are you going to be using it wet?
Dry, because I make a flour base.
Flour based. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna grind your rice, and then you're gonna soak that rice in the water in your recipe overnight.
So you have to soak
It's a
it.
sourdough bread. Yes, absolutely. If it's a whole grain flour,
So if we fry
that's sourdough. That's the fermenting. Absolutely. I see so many people day in and day out that are full of cavities ear to ear, and all they eat is whole grain bread. But they don't do this. So it actually not only does it not release the nutrients, but it steals nutrients from you, and you end up with cavities and other issues.
So you soak it in the recipe.
Correct. That's sourdough bread. That's what it is. Yeah.
The salt water, does it contain the spider?
And this is one that I've studied a lot. Ideally, you would remove it. However, if you're soaking it as like a bread recipe, like we're talking about, you do still have the phytic acid, but you've inactivated it. You've changed it. And if you do it in a true sourdough ferment, the yeast is going to inactivate and activate other enzymes. So I'm also doing a gluten-free sourdough bread making hands-on class in November.
Okay, if you're, like I have to make a base, and it's white flour or white rice, brown rice, potato starch, tapioca, and I
Yep.
keep that as a base.
Yep.
So when I make cookies or brownies or whatever,
You're going to start the day before, and you're going to add the liquid the day before, and then you're going to add your rest of your ingredients the next day. Yep. Believe me, this is my life. I have typically 4 bowls of something soaking at all times on my countertop. Yep. I'm right now perfecting the gluten-free sourdough bread. I just made a delicious loaf this week. And pancakes and German pancakes and waffles and all week long. That's all I've been doing. Exactly. Come in November. Yes.
So when you say soaking, is it only for all the rices or beans, whatever, only 6 to 8 hours?
Yeah, overnight.
It's
just the way I think about it.
A couple days until it starts to sprout.
You can sprout it, but then that changes it entirely. Now you've totally opened up, and we will get to that in just one moment when we get to the gardening section. Yep, because it changes, and it's good, actually.
I just want to get this straight in my head if I'm understanding you correctly. So if you buy a bag of rice at the store, you don't just cook it. You don't do that.
You put it in water the day before. And it changes the way you're uptaking nutrients from everything you eat with that rice. So guess what? Guess who knew this?
And then you cook it the next,
Great.
it's less cooking time, or you're just warming it up at that
No, you're cooking it the next day. So you're just soaking it. So you're not cooking it overnight. You're just soaking away the enzyme on the outside, or the acid on the outside. Guess who knew how to do this? I remember reading a book about, I think it was a Louis L'Amour book. Anyone ever read Louis L'Amour books? I love Louis L'Amour books. My husband owns every one. Do you have every single one? You need to come look at our collection, man, because my husband loves them. We have moved those Louis L'Amour books probably 10 times, and every time I think, why am I moving all of these books? Anyway, I remember, I think it was a Louis L'Amour book I was reading one time, and it talked about how some guy was hired on as a cookie. Remember, they called them cookies. Was hired on as a cookie for like this wagon train or, whatever they were, and he didn't know how to soak the beans. And so the guys came in later, and the beans were hard as a rock, and he was so embarrassed, and he felt so bad. And so guy had to pull him aside and tell him how to soak the beans and how to do whatever, how to cook them right. So guess who knew how to soak grains? Everybody prior to about 50 years ago. We were in the I need it fast and I need it now mentality. We started leaving all of those things behind, and we've since left behind nutrition along with it.
All right, so when you soak it for 6 to 8 hours, do you throw out the water?
Mm-hmm. Yep, unless it's in a soured, and you can't throw out the water because it's part of your recipe.
Okay.
Yep,
So
but yeah, you drain them, rinse them, and then put new water on it. Yep, I saw one back here. Yep.
I don't like to bring this up, but well,
Always do.
two things. I had a question. You were talking about taking a 5-gallon container with beans and rice.
Yep.
What do you think of putting diatomaceous earth in there to keep the bugs down?
All of those things are great ideas.
Okay.
Yep.
Now the second thing is, just so happened this morning, I was watching an education channel, and they were doing all about rice, how it's processed, how they
Arsenic.
manufacture everything and from growing and everything. And they said, well, the phytic acid is true, it's on the husk. But when you have white rice, they said they tell you not to rinse white rice because
The starches.
They spray. If you buy enriched white rice, they have sprayed the nutrients on the outside of the grain.
I don't want those nutrients, I'll tell you right now.
Well, but everybody
Yep.
should know that, 'cause,
And have you ever soaked that rice and watched that little filmy, milky stuff come to the top? It's the starches, but it's also what you're talking about.
that's right. And also, if they put calcium carbonate on there and spray it, that's just
It's rocks. Yep. So soaking is good. And also there's controversy. We can talk about controversies for days and days and days. It's controversy about arsenic, that it's a problem with rice as well. This will take care of that as well. So it just takes care of everything. Just do it. Your pioneers ancestors have done it. I soak the white rice too. Yep.
This is just to confirm. I have a Japanese friend, and she's old, and she says you never use rice without getting rid of
Always.
it. She soaks everything.
Yep. Always.
And gets rid of all the milk.
Yep.
As soon as the milk is gone, she says then you can use it.
Always. Yep.
That's why they live to be 100.
Exactly right. Yep. He said that's why they live to be 105. Yeah, like we'll let her real quick. Yeah.
So I try to buy most of my things organic, but obviously sometimes it's expensive.
times I opt for soaking them when I can't buy organic. Do you feel like that's
That's a
like
great tip.
Yeah. So
Yep, it's a great tip. Yes, because sometimes you just can't, especially if you're going to buy in bulk like we're talking about for storage. Yeah, again, I always think, okay, organic versus dying because I have no food. I'm always going to pick non-organic and not die. Always. Yep. 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 Corn's a whole nother story. Corn's a whole nother story. You have to soak it in. You have to nixtamalize it. Whole nother story. We'll do it. We'll do a class on corn. Yeah.
So when you were talking about flour and needing to freeze it, I was getting so overwhelmed because I feel like I have a lot of flour that isn't like I have.
It'll just have
long-term
bugs.
storage.
It's okay.
Okay. So it's not like it's gonna go totally bad.
No, it's just gonna have bugs. You just scoop them out or eat them either way.
But in general, do you recommend like having the long-term storage for flour and wheat, and then as you pull it out and use it, that's what you freeze?
That would be ideal.
And then
Yep.
are you just using like as you're making bread or whatever each week, you're going to the freezer to get your bread?
Yep.
Or
Ideal. Yep. Yep. Or scoop out the bugs and then you don't mind them as bad. Yes.
Scotch Broth. You said there's only, excuse me, one brand without the.
It's the only brand I found. It's hard to find. It's hard to find. It seems like it was. It has little leaves in the logo. I can't remember. Does anyone know the brand of bouillon without MSG? It's a box. I don't remember. I'll try to find it. Yeah, I'm sure you can Google it. Okay, I'm going to go to gardening here. Did you find it? I did find it at Winco. I think this, is that it? One of these does. This one does. Very good. So the Nor brand, just look on the, so monosodium glutamate, disodium glutamate, those are the things that you want to not have.
What does it do to it?
It makes your brain not work right.
Other than that.
It's a neurotoxin.
It's a neurotoxin, yeah. But again, death, neurotoxin. You know, if I have to eat it, I'll probably just eat it. So, you know, I am super basic that way. It's like if, you know, and, you know, I'm gluten-free as well. If I have to eat wheat and it's that or death, I'll eat wheat. You know, I'll feel cruddy, but I'll eat it if it means that I won't die. And I probably rely on somebody else to help me, you know. So that's part of it too. Exactly. Okay, gardening. I love gardening. Obviously, you can go see, you know, out there, walk around and get some ideas. But here's some of the things you need to have stored for an emergency for gardening. You need to store seeds. We are going to talk about seeds. And there's some very specific, but really only one thing that you need to do for seeds. They need to be heirloom seeds. What does that mean? So, not modified, correct. So this is my favorite brand called Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. You can see it just says heirloom. All they sell is heirloom. It's my very favorite company. There's a few online that are. The reason is I described how I was going to go and harvest those bean seeds out of those bean plants out of there. If I had planted a hybrid bean, I cannot harvest those seeds and expect that I'm going to grow the same plant that grew that seed. Because hybridized plants are hybridized or changed for certain characteristics, like maybe they want it to be storable or all ripen at the same time for commercial harvest, or have a shorter plant so they're easier to harvest off of, whatever it might be. They've bred for certain characteristics, and because they've changed the genomics inside of that seed, they will not reproduce true to seed. So you cannot just go and harvest a bean seed from a hybrid plant and expect that it's going to grow the same bean seed next year. Not only that, but it may not even sprout at all. So sometimes they're non-viable at all. They don't even sprout at all. So you have to plant hybrid seeds, which means that you will have predictable reproduction and you will be able to then save your own seed, because this to me is the ultimate emergency preparedness, is a seed that can grow into a plant, that can create 10,000 more seeds, that can grow into 10,000 more plants, that can create 1 million more seeds, that can create 1 million more plants. I mean, is there anything more beautiful than that? So you have to store heirloom. Heirloom, the other word that can be used is called open pollinated. So those are the two words that you can hear used, but heirloom is just your safety bet, not hybrid. And the way you'll see it is you'll see them say like F7, Ludi, you probably know better than, what do they call them? Like F7, F, like they call them F. It's like in old, takes me clear back to my biochemistry days, alleles, they call them different. Anyway, they F things. It's the generation that they are. So if it says any kind of hybrid, do not get it.
Is this particularly for heirloom seeds that you recommend?
This is I do not believe it is. No, this is called, either you look at Baker Creek Seeds or it's called rareseeds.com. And I will tell you, you need to get seeds in November. If you wait till January or February, they will be sold out. They've been selling out year after year since COVID-19 happened. So you need to get, why wait till November? Why not now? Because they're harvesting their seeds right now. Like I said, you know, my seeds aren't completely ready out there. They're gonna be ready in the next month. They're harvesting the seeds. You're gonna get fresh seeds, ready to go. High germination rate, meaning they'll grow well, and they will still have some. If you wait till January, February, they'll be gone.
How long do they last?
So good question. So what I do is, these are not this year's. These are March of 2015. Okay. So when I use my seeds for planting, because I don't plant every single plant that's in here. Like this is radishes. You can see I didn't plant them all. I will then take this bag and it goes into my cold storage. So I have year upon year after year. Now, will every single one of these radish seeds germinate? No, but I guarantee you one will or two will. And so they will last. The cooler you store them, the longer they will last. I do have some emergency seed packs that haven't been opened at all in my freezer. If you store them in the freezer, you're going to be able to store them for multiple years. But I guarantee you that probably at least 50% of the seeds in this bag from 2015 will still germinate. So this is just my long-term arc. You know, this is my Noah's Ark, is all my years of seeds. And just make sure you have them. Sprouting seeds. So I want to walk you through this. The first day an emergency happens, the first thing you should do is start sprouting some seeds. And you don't have to have a fancy sprouter. It can just simply be a mason jar with some sort of a mesh. It doesn't even have to be a fancy mesh. It could be a t-shirt that has an open weave, you know, or anything like that, or a dish towel that has a, you know, fairly open weave on it. You just want to be able to put water in here and then dump it out and have the seeds not dump out. Why do you do this? Because those beans and rice and things, they actually make a complete protein, but they don't make a complete nutrient profile if you eat them. There are nutrients in a sprouting and growing seed that you cannot get in anything that's dried or dehydrated or preserved long term. You need to have the enzymes that exist here to be able to digest those beans and rice. So enzymes are something that are alive, that will inactivate at about a little higher than 80 degrees. So between the 80 and 90 degree area, they will deactivate enzymes. Enzymes are literally the reactants that you need to add to your food to be able to digest it. So if all you eat is canned and dehydrated beans and rice day in and day out, your digestion is going to seriously suffer. So you need to have something growing. This is the easiest way to do it, is grow some sprouts. And it takes like a tablespoon of this, or probably less, to fill up that whole jar. So that's the first thing you do day one of emergency, is you soak some sprouts and you stick them in this jar, and they're going to be going, it says 4 to 6 days. It's really not even true. 2 to 3 days. It's some sprouting. It's a sprouting mix. Yeah.
Can I see the front of the bag?
That is the front.
Oh.
Yeah. The back looks like that. This is called Rainy Day Foods. Yeah, rainydayfoods.com. But you can get this at any health food store. They have tons of sprouts. Tons of sprouts. Amazon has tons of sprouts. Yep, and they will store for forever. And it's typically, this has wheat, so I wouldn't use this brand. Beans, peas, garbanzo beans, spelt, lentils. I really like alfalfa or broccoli seeds. So mung beans are great. Yep, great. So as long as they have those, as long as they're living, those enzymes will help immensely. Then you start more sprouts every other day. Just add to your recipes. You put them on top. I mean, think about like sprouts on a sandwich, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, they're great.
You want the sprouting time to be fairly consistent with the different seeds. So your mix, if you put mung beans in, then
they're longer.
They take longer, and they usually cause mold.
So that's why these mixes are probably specially made with things that'll sprout about the same time. So just keep your mung beans separate. Just do them on their own.
It's been so many years. Can you refresh our memory? How do you sprout?
So you put like a teaspoon of seed in here, you cover it in water, and you soak it overnight. Again, you're inactivating that enzyme. You drain it, you let it sit there for 8 hours. Put more water, rinse it, drain it, let it sit there for another 8 hours. Put more water in, rinse it, drain it, let it sit there. That's it. And you'll see the sprouts start to come up. But you want that first soak to be about 8 hours overnight. And any of these seeds, like these radish seeds right here, they would sprout. They would work as sprouts. So I could just pour some of those in here, and it will give me very quick, because how long from this bag to what's growing in my garden? Couple of months. So what if the emergencies happen right now and you have no food and no source for that? This is going to be months in action. It means you need to plant it today so that you can get it months going, but this is going to be 2 days before this is something edible. See how this is actually gardening. People don't think about that.
So I have a question. I had some sprouts going when we got the boiled water for it. And I'm thinking, so do I need to use bottled water to be routine? That's an awful lot of water, right?
Yep. Yes.
So,
Or that's why you get a Berkey, and then you run everything through that. And yep.
If in the sprouting them, and then I just wash them really well afterwards, I'd be fine if the water were bad. But
no, if the water were bad, the bugs are going to live there because it's not going to heat it. You're not going to heat, you're not heat treating them. So any bugs are going to stay alive on those. You wouldn't want to do chemical treatment because it's going to kill your plants. Yep. So you need to off gas your water. Yep.
Do they have directions on how to do the sprouting on the
Yes.
sprout
Yeah.
when you get it?
There's tons of stuff, and I have it in the book too. Walk you right through how to do the sprouting. So that's what the first step of gardening is in an emergency, is sprouts. Then you eat out of your refrigerator and your freezer. Then your freezer becomes your fridge, and then you're on to this stuff. So when you start an emergency, you don't start opening big old cans. You start using what you have in your fridge. You start sprouting. This is what you do in an emergency. Now, as far as skills, how to sprout, how to grow food, I did put some specific planting guidelines on this, but in the book, there's way more information there on where to start. It's just something you need to learn how to do. I want you just to start growing something. And I always show this. These are my gardening tools, and this is all I have. This is all I use. I literally use nothing but these two things for everything that I do out there ever. So this is called a Japanese gardening knife and a pair of gloves. And you can do everything with that. So you don't need to store a whole bunch of tools for gardening. That's all I use ever. Oh, Amazon. And the link's on that list. Yep.
And also too, I got one, but I don't really know how to use it.
That's about it. Yep, it's a digger.
Silly.
So but that's a good question. Yep, literally. And the beauty of this one is it makes a really nice hole for planting. So if you put it in the soil like this and then lean it back, all of a sudden now you've got a perfect place right here for planting a seed. I make a row like this, and all of a sudden you've got a perfect row. Yep, you just, nope, never. Just the whole row, and it just pushes the soil off to the side where it needs to be. This is, you got to bend over a little further. Yep, this is nice because it's got a serrated edge, so that will actually cut a thick stem on a cauliflower that I'm trying to harvest, something like that. It does as well. This has a sharp edge, even though it's not sharp anymore. Used to be where it got used a lot. The handle's really good for hitting things, but then it comes loose like this. Then you duct tape it together. That's just, it's useful for everything. And I do recommend putting duct tape on the handle because then you don't lose it in your garden. That's why the duct tape is there, because it gets lost. Japanese gardening knife. I was taught that probably 20 years ago in a garden landscape class, and it's the only thing I've ever used since. I own like 5 of them, one for every child, so they have no excuse that they can't garden. Nope, we have 5 of them. Okay, they have them at Lowe's. Beautiful. Okay, now we know you can even get them at Lowe's. Hands-on, we're going to do chicken keeping and garden. My husband is going to be talking through that in a little while here. Okay, kits. I'm not going to go a lot into this, but chapter 5 is the kits that we talk about. Brooklyn's actually going to do a class just on kits at 11 that we'll rotate through as well. But I want you to think about, where would your family be if something happened? Like, I want you to think about, COVID wasn't like a one-time event, but, September 11th was a one-time event. Everything fell. Where were a lot of people's family members? At home? No, they weren't at home. They were at work. They were at school. They were on the subway. They were, wherever. They were away from home. So it's really important that you actually create what's called a get-home kit for your family. This just goes into our cars everywhere. And this is a little everyday carry kit that I have that just goes in my car, and it can pop in my purse super simply. And I have lists in the book about everything that goes inside of here, but it's, a medicine, a compass, a whistle, a way to start a fire starter, a little screwdriver, some money, a little bit of candy, a knife, a pocket knife. It can just go wherever it needs to go, because who knows where we're going to be when something happens. You just don't know. And most likely it won't be home. What I want you to do, the actions for this chapter are I want you to make some checklists for evacuation. Again, talking about the story of the man who just wandered around for 2.5 hours and could have evacuated. If he had had a list while checking CNN, he could have been checking off the list, because even as prepared as we are, our brains stop working in an emergency. We go into reactive mode rather than proactive planning, logical thinking mode. We're just reacting. So if you already have a list, your brain can follow a list when in reactive mode. It can't create a list. Have you ever noticed that? When you're super stressed out, you can't think well enough to actually be logical, but your brain can follow a list in an emergency. So what I did when creating this list, I just took a clipboard with some blank paper around in my house. I had a sheet that said 5 minutes, a sheet that said 30 minutes, a sheet that said 3 hours, and a sheet that said all day. And I just walked through my house. And so I walked in my kitchen, I'd look around and I'd say, okay, what would I need in this room if I had 5 minutes to leave? All right, I need my keys. I need, I just looked around. Okay, what would I need if I had, 30 minutes? What would I need? And in some rooms, there was nothing. There was nothing I would need if I had 5 minutes, but there were things that I would want if I had all day. So now I have these lists formed. So I put them all into lists, and I put a list in the kitchen. I put a list in the storeroom. I put a list in the garage. I just put copies of this. So if something were to happen, we could grab that, and in 5 minutes, we could have everything out of the house that I would want in 5 minutes. And you know the kind of things that would be. But then I also have a list for if I had a whole day, and on some of the things on that list are all the food you can fit, stuff like that. And, who knows how much food it's going to be, but all the food I can fit. But I know I will. So let's say I have a 3-hour time frame. I'm going to get everything on my 5-minute list. I'm going to get everything on my 30-minute list, and I'm going to take everything on my 3-hour list. So it's just something my brain can do in an emergency, but it can't create the list very well in an emergency. You're not going to remember what you need. Yep. In fact, I put my lists in there. Yep. So you can know exactly what I would take in my kitchen. Yep. Okay. Chapter 6, shelter. And for those of you who weren't here at the very beginning, there are restrooms. There's a sign over there that shows to go downstairs. Don't go down the scary stairs in the middle. Only go down the two stairs on the side so you don't die. Okay, shelter and home preparation. So if we have to stay home, what would we do? I forgot I was going to tell stories. I didn't think about it. I didn't see my notes here. We did this as a family. One of the things I really encourage you to do is to talk through this with your family. Where would you go? So just, I asked my kids, okay, what would happen if we had a really bad earthquake? What would you do? And my kids were like, we would walk home. I said, wrong answer. Let's talk about this. Then I wouldn't know where you were from here to, from where you were at your school. No, you stay. But we hadn't had the conversation. You need to have the conversation because you don't know what their brains are thinking. You do not know until you tell them. You do not know what they're thinking. Make sure you have those conversations. When you're at home, do you know how to shut off your gas, your propane, your electricity, your water? Do you know how to do those things in your home? Does everybody that is old enough to do those things know how to do those things in your home? Make sure they do. Make sure they know how to do that. Where are the main switches? Where are the main valves? I was changing, I don't know, I got super adventurous once. My husband was out of town and I decided I was going to install this big water filter thing under the sink. Why I thought I could do that, I don't know. But I didn't really know where the water shut-off valve was, and I accidentally clipped something I shouldn't. And it instantly filled my face and the entire under sink structure with water. Thankfully, I kind of remembered. I went, oh my gosh, I think it's downstairs. And I went downstairs, ran, and was able to turn off. But, in events that are like that, even if they're not horrible emergency events, it's probably good for everybody in the family to know where some of those things are and how to turn them off. Physically prepare your home. Those are things like securing things that could break and fall. I heard about, in California, that has a lot of earthquakes. They don't typically do glass front cupboards anymore, because what happens if you have an earthquake in a glass front cupboard? It's going to fall and break all over the floor. Now you have an incredible hazard all over your floor. So just think about things like that. How can you make your home safer? Pictures for sure. And if that's sitting above your head while sleeping, very dangerous. Yep, or hallways. Think about where they are.
Is it bad to have a
Well, how well is it anchored? I guess that's a good question. We do have one. It's over the foot of my bed, so at least it won't fall on top of my head. But think about things like that. What could fall over? Dressers, those kinds of things. What could fall over? Where would you be? And what would be safe? So that's thinking about how to prepare your home. Some things to have are some really easy to carry things like first aid kits you can grab and move to one central location if you needed to. A radio that's a hand crank or a battery operated, so you could get some things very quickly. Just think about that. One of the things that I like to do that we've done as a family as well is we put a pair of extra shoes and a flashlight and tied it in just like a Walmart bag on the leg of the bed. That way, if the bed is moving, we could reach down that and we could always find that pair of shoes and a flashlight. Just easy to find, So tie it to the edge of the bed. Okay, light, heat, and fuel in emergency. We're going to have some talks about this with people who are even better than myself. Scott and Grant are going to teach us more about this stuff later on. But I did want to talk about a couple of things from a safety standpoint. Open flames are dangerous. So I tried to research this last night. Actually, it was really interesting. If you ever type stuff in Google and think, that's not what I was looking for, it came up with some very interesting things. I was trying to search how many pioneer women died from open flames, from cooking on open flames. Again, the search didn't yield the results I had anticipated, but I've heard stories about many women that died from their big petticoats being swept into their hearth fires and catching on fire, and very, very dangerous. And they lived with open flames day in and day out. And they still have these issues. You know, the one that was so odd that I learned about? Ballerinas, their outfits were made of like very gauzy types because they wanted them to look, you know, floaty and stuff on the stage. And the stage lighting was all gas lamps. And so they would swirl around and they would catch on fire and they would go up in flames. And they lost many very prominent ballerinas. They lost an entire ballet troupe. They all caught on fire at the same time. I mean, it was like terrible stuff I was finding. I'm like, I did not think I was going to find this. Anyway, so if you're a ballerina, do not dance around open flames. Anyway, so that was an interesting search result I found. But they were used to open flames. We are not. Right? We don't even know what to do. And the other problem we have is all of our homes are built to be airtight so that they're very good at retaining or staying at temperature that we want. That's a problem. If you've got an open flame, what does an open flame feed with? Oxygen. It will quickly eat all of the oxygen in the room. What does it leave in its place? Carbon dioxide, which is odorless, non-visible. It will fill your home and you will die before you even know it. So you've got to, if you're using an open flame in your home, what could an open flame be? Is this an open flame? Anything that has an open flame will consume oxygen. You've got to crack something. You've got to crack a window. You've got to have a fresh air source. Our homes are so airtight. Pioneer days, they did not have airtight homes, did they? They had chinking. They had, stuff coming. They didn't have to worry about this. We have to worry about carbon monoxide in a big way. So just be super aware. What should you do for storage for this? I really encourage you to store multiple things. Chemical light stick. Why would this be useful? Does anyone know why this might be useful? No batteries, not a flame. Lasts forever. Exactly. It's fast, super easy. You crack it. This goes in our 72-hour kits for sure. Safe, yes, and this is also the one if you have potentially a gas leak in the home, this is the only light source you want to use. You don't want to use any kind of a flame that could ignite that gas. So chemical lights are very good if you have any kind of a light gas problem. This is a very good way to store a flashlight because all of a sudden I can do stuff too, right? When you're carrying a flashlight, you can't do stuff. Lamp oil, we're just not used to using this kind of stuff. But this is super simple to store. And if I need it, I have it. So I just store, I like to think of storage and preparation as layers as well. I might only have one of each of these things, but I have one of each of these things. So I just have layers of preparation and it helps my brain. It helps to know I'm going to be okay.
How are you using lamp oil except for just in like
I have a lamp.
a lamp?
Yep. And I buy them on online classifieds, but you can get them cheaply at the store actually too. So yeah, I have some oil lamps. They're sooty. They're dirty. There's a couple different kinds of lamp oil. This one's a pretty clean burn. But again, I'm going to worry a lot less about my ceiling than about, what living if it were that.
Back onto those magic light things.
The light strip things.
When Halloween comes out and they have all of those things, it's really good to put around your kids so that in the dark you know where they are. And so
that would be a good time to buy them as well.
Yes.
Because they're going to be cheaper. Actually, not Halloween, the week after Halloween is the time to buy all of these.
Kids come over and they go, why do you have all of these? Well, we'll be spreading.
Exactly.
Or even 4th of July.
4th of July is a good time to buy them too. Yep. That's a good idea too.
Camp out, you have all the dogs running around. You can see the kids, you can't see, no, you put it around the dog's neck or around.
I like it. So again, extrapolate this to an emergency situation. Same thing. Yeah.
Do they expire?
That's a great question.
You can
I'll
also
look and
get
see.
those really cheap finger lights that they last I don't know how many hours, but they're really cheap, right? You can get like a bipolar and they're adequate for if you want. I mean, that's the sort of
for
thing.
short term.
Put some of those by instead of a whole flashlight, you have to change the batteries every time. Just replace the finger lights to get out in an emergency.
Yep.
You have enough of those.
This says this is expired. It says 2019, but I bet you it'd work.
It'll work.
I bet you it would work. Exactly. I bet you it would work, but I should get new ones.
Or not, or maybe not last as long.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's how I feel. I can't tell you to eat expired food. However, I will tell you I ate a can of, I shouldn't admit this, but I ate a can of chicken that the expiration date was 2007 last week. I'm still alive. But I think chicken probably wasn't a very wise choice. However, I think that, again, if it, choose your poison a little bit. If you have some expired beans and it's that or death, I'm going to eat the expired beans. You can tell I live on the edge a lot. Yes, and that's your indicator. So you look at this can and there's no bulging anywhere. There's a little bit of rust though. So that I should be eating right now. And I think this one was on the ground, which is why it's probably expired. No, this one isn't. Okay, so skills, again, safety with open flames. Never leave a candle, lamp, anything with a flame unattended, especially with children. Do not get a gas-based lamp if you have children. It's just not worth it. Use these other versions. A gas-based lamp if you have children because it's easy for them to knock those over. Blowout lamps if you're going to fall asleep. I had a friend who did this. They were having a romantic evening, she and her husband, and fell asleep and caught the bed on fire. So, oops. It wasn't that romantic after all. No, it was not. Make sure you have a battery-powered flashlight for light in the night. You don't want to have to get up and light a candle for bathroom trips or whatever. Remember, all flames need oxygen. We talked about that. Store gasoline. I gave some instructions for storing gasoline. You can store, did I put on here? In the book, it says what's legal. I think it's 100 gallons. Anyway, I'm not sure. But if you add a stabilizer to it, it will last for 12 to 18 months. My rule is just basically rotate your supply every July. So my husband uses it up in the lawnmower and those kinds of things every year. And then you make a new batch of things. One key is to leave your gas tank at half full all the time. Why is that important? It's storage.
My husband always tells me this because I'm the worst at it. He's like, what if you were to get stuck in the canyon and you were to run out of gas in traffic or something like that?
Or
So
you're home.
He'll be like, I told you so.
Yeah, or you're home and you need to get away from your home and all of a sudden you got enough for make it, 2 miles. Yeah, it's dangerous. You could siphon it out of your car if you needed to. Yep.
Now, Maverick sells ethanol-free gas, and my understanding, I learned recently, is that's the part that degrades and turns
the ethanol.
Your gas bad. So if you're really serious about it, pay up a little bit and get ethanol-free.
So we should be storing the ethanol-free versions of this.
Is that?
It's better on your small engines too.
And it's better
it's
on
just so
because it turns
it's much more
into a gel,
expensive. Yeah.
clogs up your car.
But for your lawnmower, then that's what I was told.
Yep, lawnmowers, everything.
So ethanol-free will help for the storage, it sounds like.
How you store that much gas? Like, how do you safely store gas?
Your red gas can. Yep, that's it. And then they're easy to use again too.
Oh, not the new ones. Oh my goodness.
No.
You can't get into them.
Into
They're
them.
so bad.
It's not the old gas can that you just twisted off.
No, they're
Oh my
bad.
goodness, even the guy at the store had a hard time figuring it out.
So get some old ones apparently.
Well, fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's,
Get familiar with
there's something called SureCan that has come out in the last few years, and it's far easier.
To get
They have the
into.
spout on the bottom, so you don't have to pour from the top. You just pull the spout down, put it in. where you need it,
Okay, there
and
you go.
pull the
Sure
handle
can it
in,
is.
and it's called SureCan. And
Okay.
they cost more money too, but they're far easier.
They're better. Aubrey, do you have a question back there?
Some of the people online are just wondering if you could repeat the question when answering the questions.
I will do that. Help me remember to do that if I don't remember to do that. Very good.
How much gas can you legally store?
How much gas can you legally store? So I think it's around 100 gallons. It says it in the book. I think it does depend on where you live. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So you would store that
Or don't check.
have like 50 of those little red.
Yeah. So what would you store it in? Yes. I also have a couple of those bigger barrels you see at gas. You know I'm talking about, the metal barrels of like kerosene, and you can store things in that as well if you need to for larger amounts. You need to keep it cool. Yes. So it's better to keep it cool. Yeah. So garage. And then once a year, yep, you rotate it through.
Like, that's the kind of thing that seems so terrifying to me.
Yeah.
Because I have a bunch of gas like on my property.
So an outbuilding is a good, yeah. So she's saying it's scary to put it in something like that. An outbuilding's a nice idea for that. Outbuilding, like a shed.
Two things that come to mind for flames is if you happen to wake up like in the middle of the night and stuff, and you smell smoke. One, please do not sit up. This is one thing that really has a lot of people, because they smell the smoke or they stand up and it's usually hot, and they inhale the smoke and pass out and get burned in a bad way. And then the other one is with an open flame, make sure that you keep your bleach, Clorox, etc., away from your gas water heaters, because it's a heavy gas and it tends to float on the ground. Where the flame is, it's flammable. It goes boom.
Okay, so yep, some of this stuff is very much, you need to pay attention to how you're storing things, where you're storing things, the amount, the location. Do some research. That's why you take a month on this category, and you just kind of dig into the online resources on how it works. And hopefully we'll learn a little bit more this afternoon too. First aid and emergency. Okay, so I do have in the book quite a detailed list about things to get from a first aid standpoint. The one that I really, wanted to go through too is some herbal things. But before that, there's I'm always signed up for crazy stuff. So I signed up for an active shooter disarmament course, just because, why not? And I had my boys, my husband do it with us. And at the time we had a foreign exchange student from China. Well, in China, they don't allow people to have guns. He'd never even seen a gun before, okay, because they don't allow guns in China at all. But I signed him up for this class too. He was terrified the entire time. He was literally terrified to death of this whole thing. But what was interesting is part of this course, so we went through an active shooter triage. So they had the lights going and the smoke machines and stuff. And there was somebody we had to try to find it. And there were injured people all over the place. I mean, it was crazy. But what I learned is that oftentimes first aid is what you have. So, we figured out that a splint is made really nicely out of a cardboard box and a scarf or a necktie or, something like that. It's just being aware enough of first aid needs and things to do for first aid to be able to look around and be a little creative. But I do recommend that you have things on hand. So I have a fairly extensive first aid kit because I know what to use it for. If you know what to do with it, oops, something fell. If you know what to do with it, then get a little bit more. Get what level you're at. If you don't know how to use a ton of stuff, then just get a lot of stuff that you do know how to use. But I have, everything, but even things like now, gloves and masks and, this is a sling. And, I've got a bunch of stuff in here. You don't need all of this, but I just feel a lot of safety in knowing that it's all here and it's all together and I can find it really simply. You know how, somebody gets sick and you're like, oh, where did I put that? okay, I thought it was in that bathroom, but then my daughter moved into that bathroom and now it's just all hair stuff. And you know, where, I don't know where anything is. So even just putting it together gives me a lot of peace. The other thing is learn about natural remedies. So again, before 50 years ago, what did everybody use? I've learned, I actually studied this pretty extensively lately. 100 years ago is really when chemical pharmaceuticals came into being. So before that, and all chemical pharmaceuticals are made from natural plants. That's what they started from. They isolated a certain action in a plant that they knew of, and then they synthesized it chemically, and that's what became the drug that we take now. So if we don't have access to that, or if there's problems with that world, which we're not going to go into it, but you all know what I'm talking about. Wouldn't it be nice if we just knew the actions that came from the natural plants to begin with? So this is Cayenne Tincture. Right now I'm studying a book that was written in 1820 called The Thomsonian Botanical Medicine. And this guy, he's pretty incredible actually. He wasn't a doctor, but he just felt called to this. This is something he used all the time, Cayenne Tincture, because he believed that at the time bloodletting was the predominant medical treatment of the time. And they killed a lot of people with bloodletting and something called calomel. Anyway, when you get into the history, this is pretty interesting. What he figured out is rather than letting off the heat through blood, which is what they were trying to do, that he actually figured out you should heat the internal part of the body and that the body would kill off then the bugs. So he used cayenne a ton. And I really like some of the things he does because it does lead to the body being able to help itself and get better. So I really encourage you to learn some of these things. When we do the hands-on walk around here in a moment, we're gonna go over here to my herb garden. Actually, in fact, all the gardens here in front of the center and over here are all the medicinal gardens, and most of them are labeled. You'll see there's a label with the plant name as well as the plant indication. So the reason you would use it and how you would use it if you wanted to use it for medicine. But you won't memorize them all. There's no way I'm going to learn all those things. So I recommend, and these weren't on the list because I just thought of this morning. I recommend these two books. And you'll see I got this one on Thrift Books. So I bought it used because they're kind of pricey. But I got this one used. Thrift Books. This is basically every herb, and it tells you exactly what to do with it. So I will never memorize them all. I will never learn them all, but I don't need to because I have this. It's called the PDR for Herbal Medicine.
When you say how to use it, are you just meaning like the benefit of it, or like literally like
both?
In a tincture,
both.
Okay.
Both. And then this one is one I really recommend getting. I did buy this one new on Amazon called Prescription for Nutritional Healing. This is based on symptom. So diabetes. If you have diabetes, you turn to the diabetes section and it tells you natural remedies. Natural meaning just using herbs, plants, other actions, remedies for health that have nothing to do with the pharmaceutical medication. So this one I recommend to just be on hand for your family. Phyllis Balch, B-A-L-C-H. But just kind of picture in your head, it's this green and red book here, Prescription for Nutritional Healing. This is, to me, the best medicine preparation you can have. Go spend $40, get these two books, and now, okay. I think it's a compilation. Yeah, I think that one, it does look like it has an author, but I think it's a compilation of authors. The Thrift Books label is right over top of it. Usually PDRs it says Thompson, Thomson. If you just look up PDR for herbal medicine, you'll find it. And this is the 3rd edition. I think the newest edition is like the 5th edition. Honestly, typically between editions, what are they going to change? 1 or 2 things. But this was about $100 cheaper than the new version because it was on used. And so that's what I bought. That's how I do medicine. And then you slowly start to put it in. And what you're going to find is that a lot of the plants you grow in your yard, because they're pretty, are medicinal. So that's why this garden bed you'll see out here, it's pretty much a lot of plants you're going to find in any garden bed. Every single one of them has a medicinal use. That's what I want to highlight and let people understand is that the plants that surround us are medicine. We just forgot how to use them.
So some of these ones that you just did this spring, or most of them, right? Mm-hmm. Are you going to be harvesting seeds from these?
Yep.
Or are some of them
seeds and the plants and everything? A large majority of them will come back. Most of them are not. Most of them are perennial. Yeah, all of these gardens are all perennial. Yep. Okay, so sanitation. Sanitation's an interesting one. We don't like to think about it or talk about it, do we? It's like this taboo subject in our world. We don't talk about poop. We don't talk about, we just don't talk about it. I was thinking about this the other day. I thought, but every person does it. Every person. And so every person, this is an issue for, because we don't think about waste. Our waste flushes down the toilet or it goes out onto the curb and it goes away, right? We don't think about waste. We don't ever think about it. What happens when the garbage truck quits coming? What happens when the sewer lines break because we have had an earthquake? How quickly will this be an issue? So death rates have dropped exponentially in the last 100 years, and a lot of it has been attributed to antibiotic usage. It's actually false. There definitely is an improvement in health because of antibiotic usage, but the large majority of death rate dropping is because of sanitation. Because of improvement in sanitation, we're no longer living in our poop. We're no longer pooping in each other's front yards, right? We're just not. So sanitation has been the difference. 100 years ago, 50% of babies died from diarrhea. 50%. I mean, you hear the stories, about your great-grandmothers who had 13 children and 5 of them lived to adulthood. That's just doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen anymore. You don't hear about babies dying and moms dying and kids dying. You don't hear about it anymore, but listen, pay attention to the stories. They died a lot, right? There was a lot of death. What was it from? Large part of it was due to sanitation issues. If you have not thought about this or prepared for this, you're going to be in dire trouble. Really serious issues. So the first thing you have to know is that if something breaks in the lines and there's an earthquake or some disruption of the lines under the soil, everything that comes from everybody else's home will also now enter yours. If those sewer lines back up, it's all going to come into your home. So the first thing you should do is block off your own lines from everyone else's. So the easiest way, there's a great presentation online on sanitation from a woman who works for the state of Utah. She came and did a presentation for us. The easiest way to do it is you put a ball, harder ball the better. This is a racquetball, lacrosse ball also works, in a sock, and you shove it down your toilet. That's going to block off the toilet from the rest of everybody else's toilets. How do you get the water out? Everybody always asks me that. There's a trap in the bottom of your toilet drain, and if you use a plunger or a toilet brush and you just scoop the water and push it over the trap, you can get all the water out. Sanitize your toilet. Shove this down. Why put it in a sock? In case you want to use your toilet again. Exactly. So you can pull it back out again. So I put all this in this bucket. This is a luggable loose, so I could take a toilet with me if I needed to. It's all in here together. So if I have to do this, it's all here. So I have those in here. Then I also have some hydrated lime. There's instructions for all of this in the book, so I'm not going to go through in detail. Basically, what you do is you turn your toilet into dry toilet. Some of the principles, so then you line your toilet with garbage bag that you can remove and go and dispose of. One of the number one keys is, and in fact, I think there's a sanitation kit list on here. One of the number one keys to this is you do not want to mix number 1 and number 2. Urine is sterile. Interesting, huh? And it's very useful. It's actually a very good fertilizer. You have to dilute it because it's very strong, but urine is sterile. And when urine mixes with fecal matter, it's when it starts to smell and get really nasty. So women, I know, it's a lot harder for us. Men, super easy. Keep something there next to the toilet and you keep, but basically the toilet is only for number 2. Number 1 needs to be kept separate. It's useful. You can use it on gardens, everything else. Yes?
So you mentioned sewer backing up. Plugging the toilet will prevent sewage from coming up the toilet, but it'll come up your floor drains and all through your house.
So are there main block off areas that you can block off? But there's plates that you can put over your floor drains that you can lock in so that nothing will come up those as well. That's a really good point because you're right. Yes, there are actually fixed plates that you can get to put over top of the floor drain. Thank you. Very good point. Yes, thank you. Where? Think about your laundry room. Don't you have your furnace room, your laundry room? You see those floor drains that, like if your washer overflows, where's it going to go? Go look and see. Your shower, yep, you can get hard plates that'll go over those drains and keep it out. This is really a good point. Thank you. Not sinks. Sinks are different. This is going to be sewer line, different.
My ex's parents, in their basement, they have a hard racquetball, like a hard river ball, in their floor drain, and it's underneath, so that when it's normal, everything can go down, but when pressure starts pushing it up, it pushes it up.
So maybe we can use these same balls in socks and shove them down all of our drains. Yep. Is that what she says, this lady who does this? Put it on all your drains. So I remember the plates, but I was looking for where to find them because she had some sort of a plate, but I couldn't remember exactly how those worked. So just shove a racquetball down all your drains and take it off and then put it down. Yep.
Does that include sump pumps? If we have a sump pump.
Does your sump pump, it's where your sump pump drain to. So this is all just thinking, where is it draining to? Anything that's draining into the sewer is going to come back up again. So where does it drain to?
So, like in an emergency, if you have no toilet or anything, you just go in the yard or whatever.
Don't go in the yard because now you're living in everybody else's poop.
Yeah,
so you're going to use your toilet. You're going to convert your toilet to a dry toilet. So that's why you're doing this. Then you're going to line your toilet with a garbage bag. That's what you're going to use. You're going to keep a thing of kitty litter or sand or charcoal or something there by the toilet that will help neutralize what's in there. In the book, it's going to give you a list of all the stuff to do and how to do it, because and it also discusses how to dispose of that, because eventually that garbage bag in the toilet's going to get full, right? So it also discusses the proper way to dispose of it. You dig a big hole, you have to cover it for critters, you have to add certain things. This is something you need to have thought about beforehand. You really need to.
I'm just one, but I tried for 3 months on sanitation. I found that cocoa peat bricks in the potties are really good. You don't have to hydrate them at all.
You're going to hydrate them naturally.
and then on the poop, it's really hard to have the both. They both come at once. And so I use a paper towel and catch the poop on the paper towel. And then I use a big enough piece that I can cover it and put it in a Ziploc bag and take it out and put it, if it's winter, put it in the bag. And that's composted separately. But
then your other.
The peat moss, the peat, when it finally hydrates, I stir a little bokashi powder into it to desanitize it. Sometimes I use essential oils in there, but it is a good material to put under your bushes and trees.
It's good. So for those online, she's talking about using peat as an absorbent for the material. Cocoa peat is an absorbent. The main piece here is you need to, you can tell she's thought about this and she's actually even practiced this. You're going to be like 10 billion light years ahead of the rest of us, because you've actually tried some things. We at least need to have thought, something got me. We need to at least have thought about it, Yeah, because we're so repelled at the concept of it. It's just our world. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm the most clueless person in myself. But I got to imagine, until I went to one of your courses, that 99.99% of us don't think about this.
Ever.
Right, for a lot of reasons you already mentioned. But it just hit me so intensely when we consider where we live, right? Which is, what are we most prone to here? An earthquake, right? So this issue that you're talking about right now, I felt like, wow, this is crazy important, right? And the details we went through in the meeting we had a month or a year or two ago were incredible. And your book, the details, I think, are so crucial because I think it's so real, so realistic that this could happen. And then what do you do with it, right? Because you got to put it somewhere, and right, so that leads to in your the thing how you get rid of it in your backyard so that you're not contaminating the water. And anyhow,
because where does it go next? It goes to the mice, it goes to the dogs, it goes to the things that then go to your neighbor and go to your other neighbor. This is how people die. Not because they starve, not because they're out of water, not because somebody shoots them. They die because of their poop. I mean, really, it's literal. It's literal.
What if you don't have a big backyard that you can go?
You got to start thinking, what am I going to do? So go learn. You know, you don't have to. I have a book called Humanure. You know? And it just talks, the whole book's just about this, called Humanure. And it talks about the beauty, actually. They used to call this black soil. And it's useful, but you need to know how to dispose of it. So you may need to dig a really big hole, and you're just going to layer it because you only have a little bit of room, you know? So there's ways to handle it even for small areas, but you've just got to have thought about it. You've got to have considered this ahead of time.
Does it ruin? Because you said you would dig for your water. Does it ruin your water?
This is a great question. So it needs to be out of where, I'm not going to put it down back there for sure. It's going to go way out here. Yeah, it's going to go way out here. So all those things are going to be, you're going to do a little research in your own personal yard because everybody's yard is going to be different. Yep.
The lady's name is First Responder Mom.
Okay, I'm going to write that up here.
And it's on YouTube.
Yep, she's so good.
And that's the name of the book?
The lady, she's on YouTube. First Responder Mom on YouTube. She's very, very, very good. Her whole thing is this. No, Humanure is just a book I bought. I own like every book, every crazy book there is. All right. That's enough about poop. But I really needed to get, you know, a couple of the things, though, that you need to think about is feminine hygiene and baby needs. Women, we just have it harder. It's just, it is what it is, and I'm pretty sure every man will agree with us. So you need to think about it. Moon cups, all these, you know, reusable, absolutely part of my storage. Absolutely 100%, because it changes that. It changes every need. There's no more disposable need at that point if you use those. Yes?
Yeah, we need to try him.
You need to try them. You need to try them. It doesn't always work. But again, if it's all you got, you're going to figure it out, you know. But yeah, you need to try. You need to try it. Okay, cooking in an emergency. Linda's going to go through in depth. So I'm not really going to cover much of any of this stuff. She's amazing. One of the things I do want you to think about is preserving food without a refrigerator. We're just not used to doing this kind of stuff. So you can use a solar oven to cool. You can get sheeting to hang on a shelf unit, and as the air passes through, it cools. You wet the sheets. There's a lot of different ways to be thinking ahead of time. Mainly for this, you just need to practice. This is actually this is very good. Something like this. We're not used to cooking over flames. You'll see, you can go check out, I've got what's called a cob oven. My boys built that one summer. That was their summer project during high school. And they built it with everything on our property, except for the only thing that we didn't have on property. So it's built of soil and hay and sand. The only thing that we didn't have is the seal around the outside is made from fresh cow poop. And I was fresh out of fresh cow poop. So my husband had to go ask a farmer if he could get a bucket full of fresh cow poop. He asked him very specifically, what are you using this for? It better not end up on anybody's doorstep. And he said, no, this is for my crazy wife. And so, all right, he let him have a bucket of fresh cow poop. But some of the things to think about is cooking utensils and devices that don't have plastic. You don't think about that with cooking some of these things. This came from DI, a buck. That's where I get so many of these things because people get rid of them. There's so many long-handled utensils because people use, you know, they think, oh, I'm going to barbecue them. They never do. These are so cheap. Get a whole bunch of them because if the flame's over here, do I want my short little, you know, spatula that's plastic? No. It will be melted in a second. So long handle, wood, metal, things that aren't going to just melt when you do it. You know, start practicing with things like this. This is a thermal cooker. You don't have to get a fancy one. This is called a Wonder Bag. You can use, and Linda's going to talk about this, how to use thermal heat to cook things in much different ways than you're used to. But practice. Otherwise, you're just not going to have a clue how to do it when, you know, the eventuality comes. If you don't practice, you'll figure it out. You won't die, but do some practicing. It's actually really fun. Okay, clothing in an emergency. The one key for clothing is layers. So You know, I pulled this coat out purposefully. It's a nice coat. And I get all of my stuff at DI, so at thrift stores, everything. You'd be amazed at what you can find at thrift stores. You can get so many good outerwear pieces like this for just almost no money that you would be spending hundreds on, you know, if you were getting them new. This isn't a real heavy coat, right? It's not like thick. It's not super heavy. The reason is you actually don't want really heavy layers, because sweating is one of the most dangerous things you can do in an emergency. What is sweating intent? What is it supposed to be? What is it doing in your body? Detoxing and cooling you down, getting rid of all your moisture. Is that what you want in an emergency? Do you want to cool down if you're freezing? So as soon as you wear something really heavy and you start to sweat, your body's cooling itself. And you're going to be losing water, and you're going to be getting sweaty, and you're cooling, you're getting cold. So you do not want to sweat. You want to wear layers so that you can stay just warm enough, but not sweat. So you want to be able to take off layers. You want to be able to add on layers. You want things that you can layer. Definitely need good footwear, because if you, I mean, how many stories have we heard of pioneers that were walking in, you know, straps of, you know, cloth on their feet, and how sad it was. Make sure you have some good footwear. The key on clothing, though, is make sure you have multiple sizes, especially if you have children that are going to be growing. So again, what I did, this was a month, you know, I took a month, and I would just go to DI and I'd buy, you know, 3 shirts for every kid in like multiple sizes. They were $1 or $2 a piece. So you can just buy them and store them away. Thankfully, all my kids are pretty much the size they're going to be now, so we can get rid of all those little ones, except for they'll be somebody else's. But for every family member, I have it listed on here. What do you want? You know, your long sleeve shirts, your short sleeve shirts, this is what you need. Store them away. Don't use them unless your kids are growing, then please use them and cycle through them. But that's what you need. Learn about layering, about repairing. I also have some information about laundry. We don't think about that. We don't think about laundry.